Good morning, everybody. Whoa, created so many, got up early and joined us here. Okay, my chapter in the book is called Trances and Trances, again, exploring, healing and developing feminine aspects through trance dance. The subject was mainly inspired by something a female trance dancing shaman in Ecuador said once to me. She said, you people try to experience and explain everything with your heads. We experience and know with our whole body. And I always thought she has a point, because when we talk about altered states of consciousness, brought about with or without the help of psychedelics, we very often focus on the visionary aspect. It is a very Western way of looking at experiences of altered states. Lately, we are also focusing a bit more on the feeling states, with ayahuasca, of course, coming in as a treatment for emotional distresses. But generally speaking, it's the visual we are focusing on. And I want to make the case for an embodied trance, really, such as, for example, trance dances, because I think we cannot talk about exploring, healing, and empowering the feminine without understanding that many feminine aspects are actually sensory and therefore experienced via the body. Feeling, where do we feel it? Yeah. Do we know the difference? In my long practice as a psychotherapist, before I moved to shamanism, I was astonished how many people don't know the difference between a thought and feeling anymore. So I want to really make a case for embodiment here. The Tao says it's, after all, the receptive feminine, the mysterious intuition, which brings forth knowledge from the source of all being. It is the gateway to all subtleties. And to be receptive and to be in touch with that so-called mysterious intuition and other feminine aspects of the psyche, we have to experience a free flow of energy through the body, sharpen our receptivity for that energy, and then be able to melt those energies with the wider fields. A difficult task, as I will discuss, because, of course, in the course of human patriarchal history, feminine embodied aspects really have been suppressed, devalued, distorted, and even persecuted, whilst the disembodied aspects have been increasingly nurtured, overvalued, and dominate our value system today. So before I talk a bit about trance dance, I want to look at that development, because it will make us understand what actually happened to the feminine, and especially why we need to bring it to the fore, work at it, value it. So starting with the feminine, as we originally conceptualized it, it comes from the idea of the Great Mother, this primordial concept or symbol of the Great Mother, seen as the wild, inclusive and sacred force of life. So from her being emerged all of life, she sustained all of life, and all of life returned to her when dying, to then just be reborn again. The feminine, and with it then of course women, were consequently primarily seen as the life-giving, life-nurturing, life-sustaining and life-embracing force connected to the wild aspects as well as the natural cycles. And basically this came through her ability to bear and gestate and birth life. As far as we know, the feminine was in that respect honored, respected, and in many cultures seen as being sacred because she produced life. Yeah. The masculine was seen as the seeding force, And after the seeding, the masculine's task was to protect, keep safe, and enable this life-giving, nurturing, and life-sustaining force. Yeah? Keep it safe. Okay. And together they formed, of course, the whole. Over time, the feminine was also then associated, of course, with heart-centeredness, emotions, compassion, love, sensuality, intuitive, the relational, the connecting, the flowing, the receptive, and the deep and dark psyche. So if we look at all of these attributes, we begin to understand the importance of being embodied and connected to bring these attributes actually out and to the fore. I was very impressed and moved to tears, like quite a few women I talked to, about Bruce Perry's talk yesterday, who said we need to learn to feel again. We are too much up here. And so this is what this is really all about. It really is, in the end, all about that. So, I want to look briefly at the development we went through from as much as you can in half an hour. So our development, basically, so over the last few millennia, we developed from our nomadic tribal hunter-gatherer societies into what we now define civilized societies. So we became powerful users of tools. Of course, we established agriculture, we established individual possessions, a very important step, individual and collective territories. We industrialized, and now our societies will be more and more based on technology. We, of course, built ever bigger cities, ever bigger civilizations. We competed and we began to fight territorial wars to gain access to land, power, and resources. And whilst all of this was happening, our ways of seeing the world, our values, our thinking, and our power structures, of course, changed, as well as our spiritual systems. So we moved in a way. There are lots of changes, and there are positive and negative aspects, but they all have one thing in common. We moved away from valuing the feminine and the masculine to devaluing feminine aspects more and more and more, and increasing our reverence almost for masculine aspects which now dominate our society. And 5 points are worth mentioning here, what happened during this time, which led to this complete devaluing of the feminine. And what we don't value and what we don't use will die. We need to really be clear about this. This is quite important, as Maria said before. So the first point to make is a shift of focus and economical and political power. Once we began to establish agriculture and later so-called civilized societies, the focus, of course, shifted from being connected to and embedded to nature to survive. Yeah? This was a survival mechanism. We needed to be connected. We needed to be embedded to survive as hunter-gatherers. To actually being disconnected and beginning to control nature. And this is really important to see that in our development. So we needed to shift our focus to production of food and goods, exploiting of resources, gaining and conquering territories and markets. And we gradually valued those things, like production of goods, profit, power, possessions, way above the life-giving and life-nurturing forces of the feminine. This was just a natural process. This wasn't done thinking about it. So we valued them more as the natural, as the life-giving processes. And this development went hand in hand with the removal of women from economic and political power. So the more we devalued the feminine, the more we actually removed it. It really went hand in hand. Secondly, our mindsets, of course, accordingly and gradually changed. So we valued thinking, analytical planning mindsets, we valued action-orientated mindsets, we valued achieving mindsets, we valued competition, and later, of course, scientific thinking. Much, much more than feeling, intuition, sensing, connecting, nurturing, and being receptive. Yeah, so the feminine traits began to be disvalued because they weren't going in the right direction of what our society wanted, needed, how it developed. And of course, this went hand in hand with an increasingly belittling and even declaring worthless of such feminine traits. No? Don't be so emotional. Sexuality is a third point I want to make. It became suppressed, especially in women. So with the increasing creation of possessions, territories and powers, which needed to be passed on to descendants, the suppression and controlling of women's sexuality, a major primary force within men and women, was an inevitable outcome. Women and the female body were therefore gradually turned into commodities which needed either guarding to ensure fatherhood of the male offspring who inherited the possessions, or could be used as commodities basically for sexual pleasure. This fourth point in our development, which is important when we look at the feminine, is our spiritual development. The feminine, the sacred earth womb creatix, was replaced by the masculine God in the sky. So we went from here to clearly to there. This development of this, or this subjugation of the sacred feminine, is a really long process. I have described it in my chapter a bit more. But it reached its first culmination in the Judaism of the biblical era, from which then Christianity and Islam evolved, where basically the masculine God in the sky is finally firmly established, and the sacred feminine is replaced by the sexually guilty, alluring, dangerous, and therefore in need of taming woman, see Genesis, and the Virgin Mary, who is still sacred, but she's a virgin, and she's subjugated to the Father and the Son. Yeah, she is not up there anymore. So both archetypes, the mother and the whore, are still, with all their disturbing attributes, as well as the split of the feminine into those two archetypes, is still reflected within our current consciousness, whether we like it or not, or whether we are aware of it or not. And the fifth point in this development towards complete imbalance, which I want to mention here, is the eradication of spiritual ecstatic practices and the removal of women from all feminine, from all spiritual power. The eradication, it is well documented in a way that all imperial and developing societies suppressed over a period of time women's exercise of religious and spiritual practice and authority, splitting us further, of course, from the deep and dark psyche, as well as from an embodied spirituality. The suppression and almost eradication of the physically ecstatic spiritual life of women is also well documented. For example, the ecstatic trance dancing women disappeared from Asia. Patriarchal Rome stamped out almost all of the women's mysteries, and later on we burned witches in Europe, not only for their herbal knowledge, also for dancing around the culture, for their ecstatic, embodied spiritual practices. Later, the remaining indigenous earth-based practices from Polynesia to Alaska to sub-Saharan Africa and India were equally, where this spiritual practice were equally the domains of men and women, were eradicated by European conquerors and missionaries. and many focused on the ecstatic ceremonies and dances, condemning the ceremonialists and dancers as devil worshippers, and that usually brought a death sentence with it, or as uncivilized savages. So this suppression and eradication of the physically ecstatic spiritual life not only forced the wild, spiritual, intuitively knowledgeable feminine behind the veil, it produced, and I need to bring that sentence in because I love it, Aaron Reich calls it so pointedly the eradication of ecstasy and joy on a global scale. And I think this is quite a sentence because that really characterizes what actually happened. And it is a global scale because we did conquer the world, more or less. So, in brief, basically, and I don't know if I can get everything in brief, basically, the move from the sensing connected body to the thinking mind and disconnected head, together with the degrading, violating and controlling of the female body for most of recorded history, not only kept the wild, sensing, instinctive and heart-orientated feminine suppressed, it forced it to adjust to masculine standard in behaviors in very complex ways, distorting it profoundly and forcing it into hiding. Adding to this the expelling of the sacred feminine and the physically ecstatic from most of our religions and women from our church and spiritual hierarchies, we can say that what has been done over many millennia to life on this planet, to the feminine aspect of the human psyche generally in men and women, and to women specifically, has produced separation, deep emotional and mental wounding, shadow issues on a grand scale, as Maria already said, within the human collective psyche, and has contributed to keeping us on a level of restricted and separated consciousness, which is really, really important. So where are we now? Is that my next slide? Yes. Where we are now with the feminine, the hypothesis that we are actually moving to the androgynous might well be right. But from my experience in working with women, from my many teachings I had from shamans all over the world, from looking at where society is right now, we are missing a step in between. The step in between is really to search for the feminine, to rediscover it, to reinstate it, to value it again, and actually to bring it to the fore within ourselves as well as within society. Because we sense, all of us sense, that we are so out of balance, that we are on the brink of collapse, but we don't quite know what to do about it and how to do it. And I think that's why we need to absolutely look at the feminine. We absolutely need to look at it. So to do that, to bring the feminine back, to strengthen it, to reinstate it, to value it, we need to firstly understand that the feminine cannot flower in a disembodied form, and that our whole society is moving towards disembodiment. And this is where the tension is, and this is where the problem lies, and this is where the work is. We need to come back. Intuition, sensing, feeling, relating, and being in tune with the natural cycles and with nature depends directly on our connection with the body, on us being embodied. And the second thing we need to understand, I think, that the expansion of consciousness is not only about flying higher, it is also about diving deeper. It's also about diving deeper, to experience not only the feminine, but also our deep individual and collective wounding and our shadows, so that we can really begin to understand who we are, what we can be, and what life is about. If we keep on declaring that these shadows don't exist, if we keep on pretending that the drums of this world will just disappear, we do not understand our full spectrum. Our full spectrum is also the dark. No. And for that we also need to dive deeper, not only fly higher. That's what I mean with that. I think where we can start is really we can start to learn from indigenous cultures and traditions for two reasons. Because they are still more connected to nature and the earth, and with that automatically, without having to work at it, still more to the feminine. Yeah, I'm not glorifying indigenous cultures. I agree there with Parry. I have seen many, and they're not all beautiful and wonderful, but they are still connected to the earth, and they are still connected to nature. So they are still more connected to the feminine aspect, or to the base feminine aspects. And also, they have never stopped utilizing ecstatic, embodied trances. They understand that the body is a vehicle, that it is contained within the spirit field, that is an expressed, manifested form of spirit, that it is important for perception, reception, information, and direct knowing, and ultimately for transformation. And this is the feminine. In the end, it is all about this direct knowing and about feeling again. So I wanted to very briefly, how much have I gone? 3 minutes. Okay, why I feel trance dances work and any ecstatic embodied stuff works in a way is that it always happened. And I want to come to today. Today we find that intentional trance dance done with an intent can play a major role in exploring, connecting, healing, developing, and empowering the feminine, because it works on 3 levels. It produces that free flow of energy which is necessary to reclaim vital feminine aspects, such as connection to the rhythms of nature, to women's own nature, to experiencing whiteness, and to sensory capacities like instinct and intuition. It works on the mental, emotional, because we will hit our wounds. And these wounds are held as blockages in the body, as energy blockages. Through trance, through embodied trance, they will come out. And we will release emotional energies arising from very intense anxieties, deep sadness, and often enormous rage, especially in women, but also in men. Men are raging about what has been done here, especially now. And then it opens, in a way, the pathway to those more softer energies, to those feminine energies which the world so desperately needs, of heart and compassion and connection. And the third is, of course, it works on the spiritual and numinous and transpersonal level. We can experience it when the dancer becomes the dance, when the energy rises and merges with the wider field. This is where we get visions, teaching, subtle insights, and so on. So I have a few examples for you, but I can't bring those anymore. I wanted to close with coming back to the beginning. I said that I want to make a case for embodied trances to become aware of and explore, heal and empower the feminine, but also to remind us that we have to remember that the power of the feminine is connected to us being physical beings. And as I said, it is not an easy task because our overall development goes in a different direction. But I like this one. The feminine and the masculine is in both men and women. Well, I wrote that, but I still like it. It is our choice, which we nurture and bring to the fore at this moment in time. And remember what Einstein said, we cannot solve our problems on the same level they have been created. We need to bring this feminine to the fore. There is no choice. Okay, I need 1 more minute just to close. Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. So the feminine is both. Balance does not mean in equal measures. Balance is to utilize the feminine and the masculine energies at the right time, in the right context, and in the right circumstances. for this, we need to value them equally.
Christa, could you just put the slide back?
I know. I think my last slide is not because I'm cutting something out.
Go there. Go forward.
Yeah? Okay. I went back. No, it doesn't matter. So, let me do my last sentence before I show you the last slide. I believe that in this moment in our human development, we need to access the embodied feminine, heal it and empower it, and above all, use feminine aspects as the basis for our human value systems, not as a it comes at one point after we have thought enough, analyzed enough, conquered enough, you know, been competitive enough. We need to use it as the basis. Only then can we bring to the fore what the world so desperately needs, the reconnection to the wild and nurturing nature, and to the deep and dark psyche. We can only then begin to value life properly again, and be the nurturing beings we could actually be, the compassionate nurturing beings. And we will go more towards an embodied spirituality. And only then, I think, can we go from here. Yeah, this is really important. This is what's manifesting at the moment out there. It's the toxic masculine par example now. And it's dangerous. So only then can we move from this to hopefully this, valuing both, and in the end to this. Thank you very much.